I want to talk about what my normal day is like. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can vlog.
Yeah. Well, this has context. I usually wake up at about 6:30 my time. And I get ready to go to a medical clinic specifically directed at chronic illnesses. And I sit in that clinic for like about 9 hours for a lot of my day while going up and down floors and trying to enroll minority individuals. I'm still trying to keep it vague, so that sounded like really clinical, like I'm othering people, but it's racial and ethnic minorities, sexual and gender minorities, individuals with disability in addition to their chronic illness. In that time, I have to run back and forth from my office because I see anywhere from like 4 or 5 of my own therapy patients in a day. Typically focused with the same concerns, chronic illness, and experiencing different modes of social and economic marginalization. And in between that time, I, of course, work on my dissertation when I can. Then I do some kind of rotation, providing assessments for people with chronic illness. And I coordinate one of the studies that we do to help out with that. And then at night, anywhere from like late in the evening till like 9 o'clock, I run the free clinic for mental health services that I provide and that some of my colleagues provide. That I really played a pretty critical role in starting several years ago. And then I go online and get told that I'm a reactionary fascist for saying that maybe we shouldn't focus on individual politicians and their subjective narratives of experience, and actually focus on enacting things with material change and directing efforts towards that. All this to say is I put in probably like 80 to 90 hours a week, every waking second of my life that I'm not doing this for like an hour and a half. And then when I get home, I work more on my own personal work, that is scholar activism in the same way. And then some fucking idiot on Twitter who watches Bosch tells me, oh, just wait, there'll be like Milo Yiannopoulos in a couple years. And I've dedicated my life to like dismantling these hierarchies that these people claim to care about. And when I point out the contradictions in those things, I'm labeled as a fascist. And of course, I'm talking about myself as an individual, and this is anecdotal, so not super valuable on a wide scale. But I think in the same way that I just talked about, individual analysis being important when it's reflective of larger things, I think that this is a gigantic problem. And I want to know where that comes from,
Comes from watching Bosch.
It does. Yeah.
And that mode. It's not Bosch individually, because there's a large number of people that are like Bosch. I think it's probably also worth saying why you are called a fascist.
The article that I just read about the untenable politics of trauma and focusing on subjective individual narrative as a coercive way to guide political discussion, I think that is relevant.
She's talking specifically about an article written by Mila Goryev. Please excuse me, Mila, if I did not say your last name correctly. It's a TwinkRev article. It is an extremely, extremely good read, especially relevant to the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez shit that is going on. That just seems to never want to go away, ever.
Yeah, and all of this time that we're spending on this individual politician, including ourselves in this conversation, is just so unhelpful.
Yeah.
Based off of misleading narratives and information that I would not attribute to one individual. In this instance, I would not attribute that to AOC.
No, AOC talked for 90 minutes on her Instagram live thing, did put out information that is relevant, and people don't watch that. Instead, people get bullet points of it, and those people who get bullet points of it assume that she was either in the actual Capitol building or was being ferried through the tunnels underground away to safety because she was in imminent danger, about to be killed by fascists, which is A, an exaggeration of the type of person that was there, and B, not true. By her own account.
Yeah, by her own account. And then festering these narratives that are happening right now of literally being almost murdered and that sort of thing. And then that leads us to the whole entire narrative being subject to this thing that she says. And this is such an important event that we're talking about here because of the way that it furthers, and this is really hard to say, but the narrative that these people are, I guess the people participating in the rioters are fascists, they're all white supremacists, they're all
literal murderers.
They're literal murderers. What's happening with these things are already political, like policy-based ramifications based off of the media narratives of this event that will harm leftists and will harm racial and ethnic minorities. It will harm working class people. By centering one person's lived experience,
which is, to be clear, what is happening as this whole AOC thing is going on and on and on and on,
is wielding political ramifications and doubling down on divisions that we see in the working class in ways that are incredibly harmful. It makes it very difficult because if no matter what you fucking do for the diverse working class, if you challenge that, you are fucked and people don't want to work with you because of the way that challenging power works.
I want to read a short excerpt from that article, which I think more specifically elucidates the problems that I think that we both have with what's going on here. This is again from the Untenable Politics of Trauma by Mila Goryeb on TwinkRev. Trauma politics has three untenable components. First, it arbitrarily favors those that are more comfortable sharing their personal history. Second, the personal nature of this form of political discourse makes contesting facts a matter of personal attack rather than genuine truth-seeking. That one's a big one. I mean, at the beginning of this video, ACD specifically said, hey, look, this is all the stuff I do, and then I get called a fascist for criticizing an event through the lens of material analysis, which, by the way, is extremely important if we're attempting to actually dismantle the types of exploitative and oppressive systems that we're talking about nonstop. It gets you called a fascist. And last, biggest, it forces us to contend with one's personal and subjective narrative rather than material, social, and political circumstances, which this is entirely the problem with what is going on. My problem has nothing to do with whether AOC was afraid for her life, whether AOC was traumatized by this event, or what happened to AOC several years ago before she even became a politician. None of those things are in question for me. I'm not concerned about undermining any of that, and truthfully, I hope that she gets therapy and deals with the issues that she's dealing with from this event. Streaming it is not
That's
processing
not
trauma.
It's fine if she does that, but it's very difficult in that when people frame it that way. It's as if you're questioning what her narrative is in the context of what its social and material ramifications are. You're characterized as being, against somebody who's experienced significant trauma, or you're invalidating their trauma, which is not true. We're talking about it. I don't even know if I want to say this. And the reason is that if I say this, I think this is a good example, because I don't think that by saying this should make what I am saying more powerful or more believable. But now that we're operating in this context of trauma politics, I was molested in a psychiatric hospital. That doesn't mean that I get to go and talk to my patients about my personal experience. My patients are an analogy to my constituents. That doesn't mean that I allow that to cloud my experience, cloud their perceptions of therapy, to think of, stabilization places or acute crisis management places as things where they will not be safe if that's something that they need. I don't get to center my personal experience in that to change everybody's entire experience of mental health when they're in crisis. This is at a very small level for me. We're talking about a celebrity politician who is centering her own admittedly subjective experience in how we perceive the political zeitgeist. That's not how anything should work. That's not how anything does work. That's not your job as a politician. That's not my job as a therapist. We have to do our jobs through a lens of material consequences, and it's not about ourselves.
Well, ultimately, you have people who depend on you and have people who are leaning on you as a person who is specifically qualified or put into a specific position to accomplish something, again, specific. In the case of therapy or mental health care, they're depending on you to not make it about you, to literally to make it about them.
Right. Yeah.
And as a politician, you're depending on somebody to advocate in your self-interests at a national level.
It applies more to politicians.
Much more. Significantly more.
I can only do, not in my research, but as a clinician, I can only do my job as a patient-centered, culturally sensitive individual analysis. AOC's job is literally to affect change in systems. I mean, trauma is trauma is trauma. Based off of, if we want to use the example of AOC, we can. But if I was in her position and was in my office and heard someone saying, where is she? Where is she? And I'm hearing word that people in the Capitol are intervening in my workplace, I would be very scared. Even if that ended up just being a police officer, whatever.
Which it did, and she specified that on her stream.
Which, that's fucking scary. Even if she finds out the truth of that event, that's a really terrifying thing. And that trauma experience is something that is completely valid. What's difficult here is that in the discourse about this, people are having a hard time dissociating those two things. Her trauma experience is valid. That doesn't mean her subjective narrative and the way that people have interpreted it to say that, she was literally almost murdered, perpetuates this dialogue that we're talking about of the insurrection, as everybody's calling it, and what that actually means in terms of political ramifications.
It is not about her talking about her experience. It is about her using her position as an extremely influential person who gets tons of attention as a state actor, centering the conversation on her subjective experience on something that has material ramifications for every person in the entire fucking country.
Yeah, but that really is the thing, is that generating and supporting misleading or false discourse around this event leads to justification of being pro-state, being pro-special bodies of armed men or cops who are designed to protect it, and Capitol, being pro-death penalty. There's so much literature on deterrence and how it's ineffective, but giving the state the power to decide what is dangerous, what isn't, and guess what's going to be dangerous? It's fucking communist.
Yeah, it's communist.
You're gone.
How many decades of that do we have to have in our history books to know that that's where it's going to fucking go?
It's in the Democratic Party 2020 platform, okay?
Yes.
Where they put together fascism and communism in the same 3-word clause. I'm so tired of this. And I'm so tired of pretending that the media narratives that are generated about this event are not going to be used to justify these things, because they already are. My mother is a Trump supporter.
Mm-hmm.
She had an experience in which she had a near-death experience. Like, more than the majority of her bones were crushed while getting run over by a car by a person who was driving intoxicated, who was undocumented, and did not experience punitive consequences of it because she's undocumented.
No way to find them.
Yeah. So, could you fucking imagine if my mom, like, flagrant Trump supporter, went on, like, her live stream as she knew how to use that and doesn't.
It's a good thing she doesn't.
It is. Oh, it is. And went on stream and used that experience as justification for harm towards undocumented people in the United States. Could you imagine that?
Obviously, the stated intentions of AOC are significantly
better. Yes. But you know why I thought of that.
I know exactly why. And let's just be clear about what your mom would be doing as much as what AOC is doing here. They're not actually fighting for anything.
Yeah.
They're getting stuck in their own personal experiences.
It's hard. I mean, I fucking started stream talking about what I do for a day because I'm so pissed about how people are interpersonally reacting with me. It's human to want to do that. We cannot have political movements and policy making and the direction that we want to go and how the discourse that is being had in the media directs that be based on that at all. Trauma politics did get us the Patriot Act.
That's 100% true.
That is 100% true. And the crime bill.
The crime bill more than the Patriot Act. That's a very good example. They made it politically impossible to vote against the crime bill by including the Violence Against Women Act in it.
Yep.
That is how it got passed.
Correct.
That is why Bernie Sanders voted for that fucking law.
And you know where that comes from, being able to use that? Historical prejudice against black men and white women systemically lying that they were raped, abused, or beaten by black men because of the justifying ideology of racism that was so prevalent at that time.
Absolutely.
To gain money, to gain social capital, to gain economic capital, whatever. That's where that comes from. That in the 1994 crime bill is from those narratives that just rampaged through the 1800s and 1900s in the United States post-Civil War and Reconstruction period.
And whatever domestic terrorism act you see that gets used against the left specifically from this event, understand that, again, in no way am I saying this to invalidate AOC or say she wasn't afraid or say that there's no reason for her to ever share her experience. This is not true. However, centering it and pushing this narrative that these people are literal murderers and all fascists and every single one of them is some bloodthirsty werewolf or some shit. The law that gets passed off of that, this is the same thing happening again.
So there are two main avenues for material consequences through that. One is policy making, which is already happening. And then two, what is generating the primary discourse around the mainstream media, of which working class people are consumers. And so those ideological factions are further deepened by this account. And fluff pieces written about it.
Yeah.
And the attention currency generated by it. It's just...
And all of the people who did not watch the 90-minute stream, in which nothing false is said. Let's just be clear. Nothing false.
We don't think
There's
she
no lying.
lied. Yeah.
There's none of that shit. It is just entirely based on the idea that people saw 2-minute clips from here, 2-minute clips from there. And they don't understand that she was in her office. There was not a bomb in her office building. She was not attacked by any domestic terrorists. It's that she was scared because there was a scary thing going on, and that's completely understandable. But this is not what people are acting like it is. And if I said any of that shit that she said on her own stream, if I told people, no, she was not in the Capitol building, no, she wasn't being shuffled out of the Capitol building, no, there wasn't a bomb in the building that she was in her office, which was across the street, people would say, you're siding with the fascists.
And it's not they will say that, they have said that.
True. Yeah, they just repeatedly have said that. Just for saying, literally what she said on her fucking stream, which I have said at this point multiple times, that she desperately needs to clarify the exact information in a concise and short manner on a public platform so that people who support her can stop saying misinformation that she didn't even say herself.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on Pact. P is for Peter, that's me. This is Ms. Astronaut Cowboy Doctor, that's ACD. If you're interested in supporting us, thumbs up the video. Check out the links in the description. We archive these streams for our patrons, so become one today at patreon.com/PeterCoffin. We stream every week, Fridays, 6 p.m. Thanks a ton for tuning in.
Hell yeah, brother. Cheers from Iraq.
There we go.